Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you're doing well. And today I'm bringing you an exclusive interview and conversation with the one and only rapper, songwriter extraordinaire, e.t.d.s, whose new mixtape, Even the Devil Smiles, is my favorite project he has done so far. It's been one of the records he's dropped that has really sort of received the warmest reception of anything in his catalog so far. We're going to talk about that and anything else that comes up in the conversation. Jason, thank you for making the
Yo,
time.
yo, what's up, man? Thank you for making the time. You were in a, I don't know how you find time to do all the shit you do because I've been following a lot of the stuff you do for a little while now. It's like crazy time management, you know?
Right after this, I got to dig into that baby Keem. That's my schedule right now. I got to dig into the baby
Oh, shit.
Keem. I'm probably going to react to those like on the radar freestyles and everything because those from the clips I've been catching have been like surprisingly good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just maybe that's kind of an interesting place to start because I feel like this is really sort of like a mature project from you that reflects upon not only your personal life and personal history, but has a lot in it from the 10 plus years that you've been recording and writing and releasing music. And you really sort of like came up and started building a buzz at the dawn of this sort of like new internet era for hip hop. And maybe there was sort of a point at which that was kind of like becoming a bit of a zenith where it felt like maybe we've reached the end of history here. This is like sort of it. This is just how it's going to be. This is kind of like the new state of things. But even now in recent years, as you have sort of like transitioned into your 30s, it seems like so much has changed since the days of Dat Piff and SoundCloud and everything like that. And I'm sure you yourself had to like recalibrate a lot of things in terms of like what you thought you knew in terms of getting your music out there and what works and what doesn't in terms of, promoting your music on the internet and getting it to the people who want to hear it. How are you kind of like, keeping on top of all of that stuff? And, to what do you sort of owe the success that you've seen with getting this mixtape out there to all your fans and also sort of like, turning out some new people as well who are coming across you for the first time and kind of hearing this music that has a lot of history behind it? There are probably some fans who are hearing this for the first time and kind of getting acclimated to you without knowing all of this backstory. And they're kind of hearing you through this project, despite the fact that you've been at it for quite a long time now.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing, I do believe when I first started, it was already automatically a challenge for me because I come from the DMV area, and we have people like Wale and then like Gold Link and Logic, a bunch of different people started coming out. And I think I was on the sidelines kind of watching. I remember I was in prison early in my life, and I remember saying I wanted to do rap. And when I said that, I wrote down, I was like, but I want to finish school. I just want to like go down the right path. I don't want to get in trouble anymore. And I would be cool if I have a local buzz like what Wale had before he became more mainstream. And I got into this shit like, and then it was just automatically like, actually, I do love this. Actually, the money that I'm making doing whatever I'm doing, I'll put it and invest it into my career. And it was a lot of bump in my head, like just trying to figure it out. Then Go Link and a guy named Chaz French came out around this time. And I was like, oh, wow, they're like, that's branding. Oh, wow, they have really cool cover art. They're spending time on like the curation of what they do. And I'm a really fast learner. So, I'm one of those people that it's never good to, I say, turn a blind eye to me and just kind of write me off. Cause I'm like, if I can see it, and I could see a better way to do it, I will always be able to figure it out because I love what I do. So that was a thing that I learned, paying attention to those guys. And then from there, I started building like a buzz and I started getting like, certain things started happening. And then along the lines, out of nowhere, I did Rolling Loud. And then that's when I met Denzel Curry. It's probably like the second Rolling Loud, whatever one Kendrick performed that.
Hmm.
And then when I met Denzel, we started like kind of just doing music because we were going to go on tour with Ferg. So we kind of built a friendship. And then that kind of showed me community a little bit more because I never really was a part of a community. Even now, I'm kind of like the outcast, but I'm cool with everybody, but I'm not a part of anyone's community. So then I had to figure out how, without that, to do it myself. And I think around the time, I'll say like this is probably like around 2018, I found myself, I had dropped, I was very bad, but I waited really long to go on tour. So the record came out. You really should probably put the tour out shortly after the record. I didn't. And I tried to put up some tour dates and the shit just tanked. Nobody was buying tickets. And I remember feeling crushed by that. And then I started getting cool with Top from TDE, and then Soundwave, and all these guys were kind of like around when I was making Is He Real? And I remember saying to myself, like, yo, I'm starting to run out of money. I really don't know if this is going to work for me. I'm kind of like not sure about myself. And then I was like, you know what? This is what I'll do. I'll take a certain amount of songs that I have with features of people that I know. Um, One of them, which was a song I had with Denzel Curry called Once Upon a Time Freestyle. And I'm just going to put this shit together and put out this project called IDK and Friends. And little did I know that record actually started, gave me what I needed to independently make Is He Real? And I started making that record. And that record, it was it was one of those things where it was the craziest moment in my life because Top had told me, make your record first and then go to the label. Don't go to the label to get the money to make the record. If you can get the money to make the record yourself, do it. So I bought a bunch of studio equipment, things like that. And I spent everything I had to have the equipment to finish that record. And I remember I had a meeting with Atlantic Records and they heard the record and they were like, yo, what? This is crazy. You're not signed right now. Okay, cool. And they sent me an offer. And it was like literally an offer that would change my life. And I'm telling you, I had no money, but I was like worried about how I'm gonna pay rent, things like that. And then that led to everybody else wanting to hear this project. By the time it actually came out, Kanye was calling me, Tyler pulled up to the house to come listen to it. Everybody in the industry was talking about this shit. And basically that was like that record was I did a deal, had a bidding war off of that project. And that was like supposed to be my project that came out and, changed the course of my career, which to an extent it did. And I think back to the original question, what I had to realize back then was every time I just dropped something, the landscape had changed just a little bit. And I had to understand what was going on. And I've always had managers around, but I've always had to figure this shit out myself from coming out of prison to even being at this point now. And I just guess I was conditioned for what was to come. Because if I'm honest, I think the music industry right now, especially with rap, it's even harder to break out as an artist in a significant way. It's not impossible, but it's not like before. Like there's so many people now. Like if I was hearing the way I'm hearing about Mike and people like that now, if that was like 2018, they would be way bigger than what the conversation versus the actual people like listening and streaming. So it's like very interesting because now you can make a lot of noise on the internet probably really quickly, but how many people really like actually turn that into a proper career? So I would say that just back to the original thing, the thing I had to kind of always do is never be in a place where I'm looking at it like I know everything. Always paying attention to what's changing, the different nuances, seeing how do I present who I am in the way that the current landscape is. And that's kind of what it was. Sorry, long-winded answer.
No, I mean it's a long-winded question, and I feel like it's something that people are always kind of like music journalists and musicians and fans alike are always having to find different ways to grasp and get a sense of because things are always changing and shifting. I mean, even with you kind of like, referencing the scene and the artists coming out of the DMB area, in recent years, we've seen the rise of, like the DMB flow, as it were. And that's like almost become, well, not almost, it's like a national trend at this time, where you don't even need to be from that area to be somebody who's like copying that sound and copying that flow. And that for a lot of new fans is sort of like becoming their pinpoint through which they're getting introduced to hip hop. So there are a lot of people who are sort of like jumping on that sound and that style as a trend in order to sort of like get new listeners that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah.
Just to sort of like further jump off of that, as somebody who is established as you are, these kinds of trends, these kinds of things that are bubbling up, is that anything at this point that you even focus on or like even care about or want to incorporate into anything that you do? Not even just that specifically, but like, there's all these new micro sort of like niche sounds and things that are popping off all over social media and in different places. And is that something that maybe you would have given into quicker when you were younger and sort of like trying to get yourself out there? But now that you're at a certain point, now you're like, no, I'm just going to do kind of like what I feel like is right and what's on my personal checklist.
Yeah. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, but it's the latter. Like, I think when I was younger, I definitely was paying a lot more attention to certain things. And in my own way, I guess, playing towards certain trends. Nowadays, not really. If it happens naturally, like I'm from the DMV, I've been doing songs with that flow way before. Like I know some of the pioneers of that flow. Some of those guys, they come to my house, we freestyle, we have fun, like we're homies, like, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like, so it's more so like if it actually connects to what I do artistically and it ends up coming out in my music, then it does. But if anything, I'm trying to stay away from what won't make me unique. I look at this, I look at making music is like the goal being to try to create a color that doesn't exist, meaning the only way to really do that is by taking a bunch of colors and throwing them at the wall until you see something new. To actually think of a color that doesn't exist that you haven't seen is quite difficult. I was Richard Russell from XL Records reached out to me to do a song with a really big like artist that at the time I didn't know much about this guy. When it comes out, you're like, you don't know who this is, like. But when he sent me that record, it was exactly what I said. It's like me and this person, that doesn't make sense if you just try to think of it. You couldn't think of that. However, when you put it together, it does. And now it's a color that doesn't exist. So for me, my goal is always trying to fuse what I can to create things that are as original as possible. Like I think about like A$AP Rocky's project, right? And there's a lot of people that maybe don't like it or whatever, they feel how they feel, but I know what he did. He created a color that doesn't exist. And I think in my opinion, his goal is to just make unique shit that's unique to him. And if he does that, that's what he loves. And that's successful to him. So for me, in a similar way, that is kind of what inspires me, less about what's trending. Like I don't know that I'm interested in trying to, I mean, if they send me a song and I get on their song, cool, whatever. But like, as far as what I put out into the world, nah, that's not what excites me.
I vibe with that sentiment. The A$AP Rocky record, I like a lot of tracks on it. There's not going to be another album that sounds like that album this year, you know. And the new another record that I'm really loving is the new By Storm album, which I would definitely recommend as well. That's a very kind of abstract out there record, and there's not going to be another record that sounds like that record this year. And in helping you sort of like achieve that goal, like what do you feel like helps you more? Part of what you said kind of reminds me of like, not to bring up Baby Keem twice, but like, the way him or someone like Kendrick often sometimes in certain like bars will flex the fact that they're not online. They're not paying attention. They're not plugged into certain things. It seems like, not being up on certain stuff serves as more of a point of inspiration or more of a part of their quality of life than constantly paying attention to everything. For you personally, when it comes to creating this color that doesn't exist or a sound or a style that people aren't hearing everywhere, does being aware of everything, being aware of what is out there as much as you can, help you sort of develop that sound and help you achieve that goal? Or being able to do that, is it aided more by reducing the amount of noise that's coming into your life on a regular basis?
Yeah, I'd have to go with reduction.
Which is interesting because I feel like most people, when it comes to internet consumption of anything, there's like a lot of FOMO. People are always afraid of like what they're going to miss out. And I'm sure you probably feel that on some level too. How do you reduce that feeling and get that clarity where you're like, I kind of know what I want to do, and I'm going to sort of like put to the side this idea that like, oh, I'm going to miss on this, I'm going to miss on that if I don't pay attention?
Well, you got to understand my DNA. FOMO doesn't really affect me. I was in prison for when everyone was fucking getting their
The
first
ultimate
cars and shit.
the ultimate FOMO.
You know what I'm saying?
You have no
Everybody was
choice.
getting
You
their
have no
first
choice.
cars and shit. They're like,
Right.
yo, there's this new thing called Instagram. Everybody's on Instagram. Yo, there's this rapper named Chief Keef. Da da da. Everybody's like, I'm like listening to the radio, trying. That's the only music I had at one point. So I don't know that I have FOMO in anything when it comes to creating. I think what I do know though is, and I learned this from this last project and the one that I'm gonna put out later, hopefully this year, is I do the best with production. So production dictates what I do. If this beat sounds like it could be for this person, and I'm unlearning this now, but it's like I lean towards that. But if I've never heard this type of beat before, I just start doing weird shit. And then because I think I've been doing it so long, I've done my 10,000 hours like 10,000 times. I believe I'm skilled enough to do really cool things, but production may make me do something like somebody else that we've heard. So what I try to do is I get excited about the producers first, and then that makes me make the music. And then whatever I hear now on the music, I try to do the opposite of what it's supposed to be. And hopefully it lands. And that's kind of how I started to create a color that doesn't exist. But as far as like I heard like Baby King's album, there's nothing on there that I would do, but there's songs that I fuck with that are dope for him. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then especially I think everybody references, and I think the people who reference the best are the ones who make the quote unquote best music. I think one of the best referencers that may or may not come to mind for most people is like Frank Ocean. He's a genius at referencing because his references tend to be things that don't like seem like he would do necessarily as like a black R&B male, I think he's queer or bi or whatever. And and then he'll like put that with like a little bit of Stevie Wonder, which maybe you can see happen, but then there's some Beatles over here, and then now all of a sudden you have this gumbo of like an idea that's completely original, at least from what I can see. Now, if you've heard some of these songs, you'll be like, oh no, that's from this. But then the other reference, you may not know the other reference. So when it all comes together, it's great. I think for me, I mean, Yeezus was like that. There was a lot of like Chicago house and a lot of influence from a lot of these different places that were a part of his DNA, but then he completely went left with certain things and synths and, Rick Rubin and Mike Dean and all these things. So that to me, for me, is like the goal in my own way. It's just how do you reference the best way possible? And I haven't gotten a chance to actually show the world that yet. I think on this next record, that's what's going to happen. The one I put out just recently, this one is really like, I got excited about working with Madlib. I had a bunch of beats from him. I got excited about K Tronada because we'd already done something and I like what we did, which honestly, that was another thing. That particular production allowed me to do something that I believe was fairly original because the way he went made me go in a different direction. And I think that marriage was special. I'm just now in a place where I understand that as a producer. And now I'm like putting together things based off of that. And then, when I get in front of this mic, I'm not thinking. I only think when I get off the mic, and then I'm like, it's time to make it make sense, So that, yeah, I think like for me, the production is always like my goal is, am I excited about working with this producer? It doesn't matter what their name is and all that. It just, have they made something that inspires where I want to go? So.
I think that's an interesting point kind of juxtaposed against this idea of I want to make a new color, I want to make something original, but simultaneously, and I feel like this is more in the spirit of hip hop broadly than, just making something that is only sort of like focused in on itself. But there's a history of dialogue there in terms of like, I'm going to borrow from this idea. I'm going to borrow from that idea. I'm going to reference this thing. I'm going to incorporate this into what I do in some way. For you, is there sort of like a set of criteria or some kind of like, I know it when I hear it feeling in terms of what separates in your own mind creatively what's new and what's exciting and what feels like I'm doing something different versus this is like derivative. I feel like I'm just basically doing a one-to-one copy of this thing instead of making it my own thing.
Yeah. So you know what? Here's a great example of that actually.
Hmm.
Madlib sent, I get a few beats of Madlib, and then the Devil song, the original version, when Madlib's drums is one way, then I changed the drums. That song, I don't think anybody who's done a record with Madlib has that song, Devil, the song Devil. That is like when you hear certain beats, you're like, oh yeah, Freddie Gibbs is the reference, or this person is the reference, and then I think a lot of people tend to, obviously the biggest one would be MF Doom, right? So it's like, all right, MF Doom is the reference, so I got to make my vocals sound like a little grungy. I'm gonna mix it to sound like unmixed, but it's like a lot of that stuff happened because that's honestly what they had. That's what they were making honest music based off of their resources. So when I do a Madlib track, my shit is clean. It's just mixed like, like it's like I'm adding things like production value to it that people are like, what is a Madlib beat? You're supposed to leave it like that. And that's not how I think music needs to be made. I like, again, I see the reference, I see the Freddie Gibbs, I see this person, and I'm like, I'm gonna go this way. And if you like it, you like it. If you don't, cool. I'm gonna keep making music. One day you'll like something, you know what I mean? And that's just kind of how you gotta do it, you know?
One of the interesting things that I wanted to sort of know about your kind of trajectory with this mixtape, what's come before and what's maybe to come into the future is, as I said in my review, like one thing that sort of like strikes me about you and your catalog, even if every single album or every single project isn't like hitting me personally from front to back, every one of them sounds different, you know? How much of sort of your bandwidth or thought process into each record is kind of like going into this idea of like, I've kind of already done this, or I've said this, I don't want to repeat myself, or I want to head in a new direction. Is this out of like a restlessness with things that you've done in the past and wanting to sort of like always be trying something new? Or do you have kind of this dream list of sounds and sort of vibes and things that influence you that you love that you're hoping to be able to achieve or try or go for one day? And, you're just kind of waiting for the right moment to accomplish it or attempt it.
Well, there is a lot of stuff that I want to do, and I'm waiting for the right moment, for me to attempt it. I think even like I said, like what I have coming next, I feel that way about. It's more of what I want to do, and it's my most original music. But I came in the game rapping, and that's what people respond to, and there is that aspect. I think at the end of the day, we all love the art that we make and what we do. And there's this weird relationship between art and commerce that always kind of dances together, and it never ever meshes well. It's very rare for you to be able to figure out how to balance that and have the structure to do that at the highest level, especially now. So what I mean by that is I may creatively be one way, but it may not be time to drop this particular thing for a few different reasons. I found that challenge actually when I made You See for Yourself, because from Is He Real, I made that completely independent, right? And then it was this thing where bidding war, a bit like a literal bidding war happened off of a record that was not even out yet because of how good the industry believed it to be. And I put it out and it did what it did, and it helped me a lot. So by the time it's You See for Yourself, I'm with Warner Records. And the reality of that is we're not in the old days where they're like, we're gonna shelf you if you don't make hits. It's not, no, it's not that black and white. There's a way they do that, and it's just not spending money on marketing.
Right.
So now you live in this world where I became a millionaire off of Is He Real? That was like my first $1 million, and now I'm in this world where I'm like, all right, I want to be able to do the thing that like Kendrick and J. Cole and all these guys were able to do when they were able to balance that art with the commerce thing, at least seemingly. And and go to the next level. And I think in my own ways, IDK, ignorantly delivering knowledge, I'm like, all right, this is what I want to do. So I make a record like You See For Yourself, where at first it's exactly what my name is, ignorantly delivering knowledge. I'm kind of bringing you into this thing, and you're like, okay, there's bangers on here. Okay, there's this song that's like, Shoot My Shot with also was on my first radio record, whatever. And then it's like, and as you start to get into the project, about midway through, you start realizing it's getting deeper. And I'm starting to tell you like about myself. And then now you're seeing past the exterior. That was the idea in creating it, right? And I always thought, because I just got out of prison when swimming pools was becoming a thing. I always thought it was so cool how Kendrick was able to infiltrate radio with this song that was talking about alcoholism, right? And I always thought like, okay, how do I do that thing in my way? So that was what that was. But what I realized from that moment was um, it came off in a lot of ways for a lot of people, more like I was just going for this like, big hits, whatever the case may be. A lot of people not knowing that I've been kind of doing the same shit, the same formula. So it's like, it's less about things sounding the same and more about this formula based around my key principles, one of them, which is ignorantly delivering knowledge, right? And I think that for me, I've always kind of tried to keep that going as much as I could. And then in these recent years, I realized I need to kind of maybe try a different way because at the end of the day, I made that music. It's out. People got it. What's next? What can I do better?
Mm.
And that's why when we reach like a project like this one that's just come out, this is just me realizing, okay, I love gumbo. I love that I can do all of these things, but how do I focus it in a project? And maybe instead of putting everything in one project, let me just try to put one project that's rap and then maybe one project that's this thing and then have the fans pick what they want out of it, and at the end of the day, both of these projects are my work, but there's always that fear of what about your livelihood? Are you going to be able to pay your bills still? I told you how I came in. I told you 2018, I was in a place where I'm like, oh shit, I don't know if this is going to work. I was
Mm.
like going to give up. I was depressed. I was like, fuck it, fucked up off of that shit. And so now when I get into the game, I'm like, I finally made it to some degree. I want to make it even more. But then there's like every decision I make matters because I could lose my audience or I could lose, let's just say, funding or from, whoever's, helping to back this project. And that is where, decisions like maybe it's not time yet kind of start to come in your mind. So it's like this weird strategy because at the end of the day, what sucks about what I do, not sucks, but what is a challenge for me is I make music, but I also I'm very instrumental in keeping like my career going. Like, and it's not like I could just be a mindless artist and make the greatest art in the world. And there's some business dude all day long just making the plays for me, right? And I have to always consider certain things whenever I do things. And I think every artist does have to do that to some degree. And that's why it's like I can't just do what I want to do every time. Like it just doesn't make sense all the time.
Well, for your next album that this tape is obviously like building up to, what do you feel like this album is going to be time for? What is this moment? What is this opportunity providing you the ability to do that you didn't have either on this mixtape or any sort of previous record?
I think it's gonna allow me to show the level of originality that I actually can strive for. I think that it shows a different skill set that I haven't really honed in on necessarily on a project yet. And I think it's I hope the world, sees it the way that I do. I can only put it out and just see. I think it's one of the strongest efforts that I've ever put out in terms of what I like, the boxes I like to tick, which is originality, vocal performance and execution, melodic performance. I have some really cool features in people who the world probably would never see me work with, but they believe in this record the way that I do. And I think it's a new beginning for me. I've had to look at IDK as more of a project than an artist because I think everyone's confused. Like I was playing this new record for some guys, the guys at I think it was Untitled, and they were like, "Oh my god, like this is ridiculous! Like how was as IDK like, are you gonna do this under another alias because it's so different?" And then I thought about it, and I realized, yo, I don't think IDK is a person. I don't think that's, I think Jason Mills was this project. That was me telling my story as Jason Mills, but the music is IDK, right? But I think IDK is just like, it's ironically, it's like people think it's I don't know, right? So it's like, this is a project. This IDK is the project. This project is Jason Mills. This project might be Jay. This project might be, whatever. And I think that's just honestly how people may have to, as confusing as it may be, have to look at me. Because if you listen to my music and you say, okay, IDK is the guy who makes this Afrobeat sounding song with Burna Boy. All right, let me go to Spotify and go listen to it. I'm gonna hear more of that, and then you're like, wait, what the fuck? Like, it's like, that's unfortunately and fortunately, it's a challenge that I've had to kind of do, but it's really me. My mom's from Sierra Leone, my dad's from Ghana. Burna Boy came to my fucking apartment, bro. The same apartment where I was depressed, trying to figure this shit out. He came with his girl, Stefan Don, smoked up my whole house. I don't even smoke in my house. Smoked up the whole fucking house, stayed till like 7 a.m, hung out with me, made the song. He's like, yo, you want to go eat? I'm like, bro, I gotta go to sleep. But that is real, that a lot of what I do, like, it's so who I am, but I just happen to be the guy who was born in London, grew up in the DMV, parents African, went to prison, started, got out, started doing rap, end up teaching a class at fucking Harvard. It's just all this shit that don't make sense, but that happens to be who I am. And articulating that to a world where they just haven't seen that blueprint before is a big challenge. So I just kind of been looking at myself like, maybe IDK is not a person. Maybe that's not what it is. Maybe that's just the reality of it.
No, I mean, doing anything that is multifaceted in the entertainment industry is always going to be a tough sell, for people, because depending on how they come across you, they're always going to expect more of that one thing. And then they find maybe 6 or 7 other things. I mean, finding a way forward that way isn't impossible. I mean, Gorillaz had a tough time out of the gate because everybody expected every song to sound like Clint Eastwood, and Clint Eastwood is the only song that sounds like Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
But with that being said, still there's like, as you said, there is still like, regardless of how the music sounds, there is this ongoing project of revealing yourself to the audience and revealing what you feel is knowledge to the audience. On this new mixtape, I find it interesting how you sort of find this balance between obviously coming onto the mic, writing these tracks, and showing the sort of like level of talent and charisma and lyricism that traditionally a rapper should, but then simultaneously you have these tracks and you have these moments where you're diving into backstory pieces that aren't always fully flattering or show you sort of like full of regret or show you sort of like, talking about a time in your life where you like really fucked up or made a huge mistake in ways that like you're still probably like reflecting on and thinking about today. When you're sort of like writing, do you have moments where you have to either second guess yourself or push past these feelings of like, I want to present a certain image to the audience and I want them to sort of like view me in a certain way, but then I really kind of feel this feeling right now that I want to use this music as an outlet for that doesn't reflect on me in the best way. How do you sort of like find that line between this is what I want to share and there's a purpose behind it, but it may sort of like show me to not be sort of like the coolest guy in a particular light or whatever?
You know what? This is the first time I might have ever even thought about that when you phrase this question. I'll be honest. I don't make music knowing it's going to come out. So I kind of just do the shit. And then I kind of let that, because it's like, yo, it's just me and this mic and my engineer or whoever's in the studio at that time. So in the moment, I'm just saying how I feel. I don't write. I do a lot of freestyling, like punching in, getting on the mic, and I don't really write anything. So it's really what I feel in that moment in my heart. And then every now and then I'm like, maybe that line, maybe say this line instead of that line. I remember a good example is actually one of my favorite songs I've ever made that I think people should check out. It does not have no burn. Nobody, barely anyone listen to this shit, but it's called Mr. Police. And this song is I worked with basically the guy who made all of the music for Hey Arnold, right? And we
Mm.
he sent me this um he sent me this record that I ended up chopping up and turning it into Mr. Police. And in that line, I mean, in the second verse, I said a line where it's like, Mr. Police, I know where you live. You got a wife and 4 kids, couple mistresses, and a guy on the side. Originally, I said, I'll them all because I'm goddamn tired, right? And he said to me, he was like, man, I love this song. It's amazing, but I don't love the idea of you saying you'll this guy. Um, and you know, and I was like, normally as an artist, you're like, you should say whatever you feel. But you know what? I was like, I'm gonna change the word to tell. So it's I'll tell them all because I'm goddamn tired, which changed the whole context, but did the exact same thing. It gave the same effect, but it changed the entire context and it made it more lighthearted and also funny. So what I realized is you get on the mic and you say what you feel, but then hopefully you have the people around you that can be like, hey man, this is what I think. And guess what? The best part about someone giving you their opinion, and I'm sure you know this, we don't have to listen to you. It's just your opinion,
Right.
you know? And once I started seeing that also, by the way, this is segueing into something else a little bit. Once I started realizing that part of it, I felt like people like you are really necessary because I remember when you did the Is He Real review, right? I swear to God, I thought you was gonna give me a 10 out of 10 on that shit. I was like, man, this project is
I'm
and then when I
sorry.
saw the shit, bro, I was crushed. And you know what's funny? That I never watched the You See For Yourself one until after you did this last one. I don't think you said nothing bad. It wasn't, you didn't say anything disrespectful, anything bad. I think you gave a very good, honest review. But I remember because of how I felt in my feelings, I was just hearing bad shit. It didn't sound good to me, right? And I realized it's important for you to do that because it gives the option, right? And by the way, I don't think it's important for everybody to do that. I think everyone should. It's a free country, and you should do what you want. But you obviously pay enough attention to a lot of the details that most people don't for you to be, in my opinion, qualified to have an opinion that everyone's qualified to do whatever the fuck they want. But I'm saying have an opinion that someone can actually take and learn from. So I wanted to say that part of it. But the biggest thing is I do freestyle everything and I don't think about whether the audience is going to like this or not when I'm in front of that mic. I don't. That's never how my mind works, you know?
But there is that moment where there's the final edit and look at and I feel like that it doesn't just have to be a musician. I feel like that is kind of what really sort of like defines a smart creator of any stripe. And like it doesn't need to be me. I feel like regardless of who it is, if it's somebody who you just like watch on the internet, if I guess you're lucky enough to have a random person who's a stranger whose opinion you trust on the internet that you have no connection with, who you can just get another second opinion from through that space. I mean, I guess that's pretty convenient. But I think everybody, regardless of what you make, should have somebody, a friend of theirs, who's enough of a friend to be honest with them in terms of, being able to give some genuine feedback and isn't just going to sort of like yes man you
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what you do, and be honest enough to sort of tell you when you're making a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, there's that I don't hear a lot of editing now. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like and not to sort of just simply put it on the idea of like laziness or a lack of creativity. I feel like artists are kind of being met uh, with a music landscape right now where there's almost this kind of pressure to give into automatically to come out with as much music as possible, as fast as possible, and just always be engaging people no matter what. And when you have to drop a song every other week or a bunch of songs every other few months or so, there's not a lot of time to be like, okay, listen, we're going to, sort of do three more passes on this and like really like hammer it out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you're not the type of person that sort of like has that kind of multi-layered thinking and can critically look back at what they do, or have other people sort of like willing to give you feedback to question where you're at, or you don't really have the desire to grow or challenge yourself or challenge your listeners, it may just be easier to sort of like go through the motions, just come out with as much as possible, as fast as possible, without really thinking about sort of like what it means or what direction it's going in or anything like that.
Yeah, I was definitely kind of there at some point, but it was a friend of mine who is very, very well versed in music. He's extremely knowledgeable. He knows like almost everything about everything, and he has very good taste. A lot of people know him for that. His name's A-Side. He basically he was the guy who did that for me a lot, but he told me you should work backwards from 3 years ahead. So think about where you want to be in 3 years musically and then start working on a plan from that. And that's why I have two, three records already pretty much together. And I think the idea is taking the time to come to stack up music, then compartmentalize what each thing means and what each effort means. And then once you have the material, that's when you start planning to roll it out, because then I can sit on this other record for the next 6, 7 months and tweak things and change things. A lot of it is, just constantly working on the idea until it just lands in a place that you want it to be at and you're happy. You also have to be able to curate that, or you have to be able to have that radar when it's time to leave it alone, And I think a lot of us can overthink our way into certain things, but that's where a person like A-Side, who's a good friend of mine, comes in. It's like, yo, don't fuck with that. Like, that's my opinion. Now, you don't have to, listen to me. Again, that's the beauty of it all. You don't have to listen to anyone, but the option to understanding is very valuable. And I think we artists, especially in rap, we're so used to everybody around us being on our dicks, and sometimes it's like we have to also we have to have the craziest ego to even make this work. Like, to be a rapper, the confidence that you kind of have to get to break through, that is like already going to make it a challenge to understand people's opinions on you, good or bad. And a lot of people around you just rather not argue with you all day in the studio. There's some people, bro, I tell people the truth. So there's some artists, I won't say no names, where I'm in the studio and I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't think to me, that's not it. And of course, they care about my opinion enough because it bothers them. And then they don't want me around, maybe. Or maybe they just don't want to, they leave this. I've had a guy leave his own studio session. You know what I mean? And that's not good. That ain't good. You don't want to do that. You don't want to create that kind of system where there's no filter, because at the end of the day, if you want to make music for yourself, make music for yourself. You don't have to put it out. But now when you decide you want to put it out, you're subject to people's opinions. You're subject to failure. You're subject to people telling you probably you should quit, all of these different things. And that's a decision you make, especially when you want to reap the benefits of when I said, art meets commerce. If you are buying nice cars and living in a nice house and da 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 da, hey man, that's part of the perks. But also with that comes people are going to hold you accountable for whatever their standard of what you should do is. you have to be mature enough emotionally to understand what you are doing and what you are giving. That's why even when artists would be like, yo, I mean, listen, I'm not like political or anything. I'm not super like I'm not an activist, but I have certain points of views based off of what I've been through. And if I'm going to put music out, I do have a responsibility. I don't have to, live by it, but I do, because people can obviously have a opinion on whatever I have to say, and it could be bad if I do the wrong thing. There could be consequences. So it's not a matter of being, fearful. It's just a matter of having that like understanding of what you're actually doing and what you signed up for. Literally, what you signed up for. You signed up when you said, "I want to be the biggest rapper of all time." You signed up for a lot of shit. You didn't just sign up for the great things, the good thing. You actually signed up for more bad than good. And I think a lot of us don't have enough emotional maturity to understand that aspect of it. So when shit don't go our way, we're kicking and screaming, we're whining, we're crying, and it doesn't have to be that way,
Kind of going back to a little bit of what you were saying about that studio session. You have this reputation though simultaneously of being somebody who, again, does connect with and get along with a lot of people, and you get a lot of great collaborations and a lot of great crossovers with a lot of different artists. Like, how do you find that balance, especially on a project like this, where I feel like maybe more than most, when you are doing a collaboration, a crossover, a feature with somebody, at least in terms of like the quality of this record and what the songs are focusing on, it seems like you ask a lot of your guests sometimes, or you have like a very kind of like sort of focused, narrow plan in mind of like how this feature is going to contribute to the point of the song, as especially with somebody who holds the weight and the lyrical talent of like Black Thought, for example. How do you sort of like, approach somebody with that sort of like monolithic sort of size and, sort of like, power and talent, and say like, okay, come on, there's a lot of pressure here. There's a lot of anxiety. You're immensely talented, but like, I kind of have this idea in mind, it's like that I think that you could kind of like fit into. How do you find that balance of like, I want to bring you on, but this is also kind of like my song. I want to sort of like, make sure it comes out the way I kind of want it, but I feel like you could contribute to it in a great way.
Yeah, it was two ways. The biggest thing is, and this is for anyone watching to understand, how does this guy do these things and get these features? It's the first thing is audacity. I have the audacity.
Yeah, it's gotta be some audacity.
I do, and that's where I have confidence. But there's a thing that I don't think the audience understands that I want to make very clear. Other artists really respect me. Other artists see how hard it is to do not only the things I do musically, but also stay afloat in this industry when there's clearly not some big crazy machine behind me. Everyone understands that, right? So there's a certain level of respect. I was actually just in the studio with Thought, and Erica Badu and Paz from De La Soul. We were just all in the studio for like 3-4 hours, talking shit, playing music, whatever. And he played me like mad shit. Like he played me like 2 hours of music, all rapping hard as fuck. And there's a producer that he connected with, not because of me, but what we did ended up creating that connection. And basically, that was some of the best music he had for me in that moment. Regardless of everything else being really fucking good, that was the best. I think a lot of people know, and Jay Electronica said this to me. Like, he's like, look, man, I'm really selective, but you have really good taste, and I like what you're doing and how you move. That's what he literally said to me when we did our record. And I think that's the sentiment for a lot of people. So if I come into a thing and I'm like, hey, man, Thought I want to do a record with you. I'm gonna put you on this beat with K Tronada, which I don't think you've ever done before. And then there's a level of excitement on trying something new. And then they also, I think, respect me as a visionary. So it's out, if Black Thought specifically, I just was like, yo, here's a record. This is my story. This is what I'm talking about. Boom. And then he just does his thing, and then I from there have to say, is this something I need to edit? Is this something that I keep like that? And then I have to be honest with him. He was talking about someone sending him a verse that's a legend. And then he had to send it back like, oh, you got to do that again. Like, you kind of have to be real about the art because at the end of the day, you're putting it out. It's on your name that people are gonna look at that shit and they're gonna be like, "Hey, I like this or I don't like this." And listen, you don't always get it right, but I think that I'll say this: I trust the people that I put on records to definitely to a certain extent, but usually wholeheartedly. But then also, I trust my ability to articulate what I think makes sense for that project, and that's kind of just what I do. So I know what Black Thought does. I know why this makes sense for this record, and I'm gonna allow him to do what Black Thought does. And thankfully he did what he did, and it worked out.
How did, and I bring this up because obviously it's two of the most pivotal and interesting moments on the tape. But how did or how does that process, because again, you collaborate with a lot of people. How does that process vary from, what you were doing in terms of like nabbing these two massive like posthumous features on the mixtape? What was the reach out for that like, and sort of like the decision making process with what you had, what you were able to hear, and sort of like, did you already sort of have these song ideas in mind when you decided to use this stuff in the way that you did, or did you sort of like have access to it and sort of write around what you were able to hear? Like, how exactly did that go?
Well, that's where me being a producer really comes in
Right.
handy. Doom, that I'd had that for some time actually. And obviously he did it before he passed away. And it was a piece of of a record that he'd already done for me. I just never put out the full version of it.
Right.
And so it just so happened that I was conductor sent the beat. And that beat actually on the chorus, when the full beat comes in, that's conductor's part. I took a piece of that and I chopped it so it goes then I pitched it to go so that's me chopping his beat. That's why I chop people's chopped beats. That's what I do. Mad Lib, conductor, that's what I do. I'll chop your beat after it's already chopped. um and then when I was listening to the shit, I'm like, yo, I remember the shit Doom was saying that I never used. He was talking about prison. I'm pretty fucking sure he was talking about prison. And that's my whole story. So with that, I took the piece and I was like, yo, let me see if what BPM this is. And on both songs, the BPM just happened to be, it was like one off from the real BPM of the song. And the vocal, and it was like perfect. Because if it's too fast, then it's all glitchy and shit, and it don't really sound good. You have to. There's only so much you can speed it up or slow it down. Slowing down is even worse than speeding it up because there's not enough information in the file. And so when I got it, I'm like, holy shit, it works. That was me. I'm like, he's talking to me. He said this needs to happen. That's what it is. So I put it in there and I wrote around that and I produced around that. And that's what he said inspired what I said in Flocka. I was like, let me put myself back in behind bars. I remember the line when I say, imagine being black in a cell and right down the block is where the Aryans dwell. I had a real story where when I first went to prison, the first day, so I go from a jail, county jail to state prison. The first day I'm like, look, I'm gonna walk in this bitch. I'm just going to be confident. I'm not going to what I mean? Because this is where people get stabbed, like rape, all kinds of shit happens in prison. That's where it's like, because those people are there. And I remember going through the shit, chow hall, this happens at like 4 a.m. You eat breakfast at 4 or 5 a.m. It's ridiculous. You got to wake up and do it. And I remember sitting down after getting my food, and there was these two white guys. And I remember them being like looking up, and kind of just like getting up out of their seat and leaving, going to another table. And I was confused by it because I didn't know the prison politics, which are much different than jail politics. And later on, I see a swastika and I see the fucking like thunderbolts and shit. Like which is, I guess, when they kill somebody in prison, they get a thunderbolt. And I'm like, oh shit, that's why they fucking got up. But they got up because in that particular prison, they weren't strong. There was only two of them. There wasn't like so they didn't want to probably create a bigger problem if I was bold enough to sit there. I just didn't know. But that particular story started to come out, and then different things like, like smoking K2 when I was in prison, like all of this shit was like based around the lines that Doom happened to have left. It just put me back in that situation, and that was the story that I told. But yeah, and then with X, it was similar. K originally passed on the beat that K sent, that I used. But then I was going through the beats again, and I was like in a different context, and I was like, "Whoa, this sounds like some Rough Rider shit." And I remember putting X. I was like, I wonder what happened to that X song, because I had done a song with him. It was me, him, and Denzel Curry actually. They asked us to get on the song, so I was like, of course, it's fucking DMX. He already did the prayer. We already did the prayers. He cleared those for us. Like, I gotta fucking get on this shit before he passed, and I did it, and we never used it. So I reached out to Pat, who produced the beat, and I was like, hey, look, is one, can I use this? Two, it was for a different beat though. It's not
Right.
for the beat you made. And he was just like, of course, but I'm not one of those guys. If it makes sense, let's do it. And shout out to him. Then we, obviously had to deal with the family, both with Doom and X. And that's the other thing. Like, I would never even attempt to do no shit like this if their family wasn't a part of this, bro. Like, it's not that serious. This is a serious thing in terms of, I'm talking about, it's not that serious that I would go out of my way to just put it out, right? Which people do, by the way. I didn't know. That is crazy to me. Like, but people do that shit. I was just like, yo, if I do not have the blessing of this family, I had to get on FaceTime. I spoke to everybody. I let them know my intentions with this. And they gave me the blessing to put it out. But if I didn't have that, I wouldn't even think about putting this stuff out, because, but on the other side of it, the reason why I have, back to the other word, the audacity to even ask is because at the end of the day, if it doesn't come out, then it just remains on the hard drive. And these guys can't make new music right now, So the beauty of having their voice still be heard in different ways and continuing their legacy, provided it is done in a way that is, right for what they've done in their career, and their family's all good with it. I do think it's better to not keep it on the hard drive if
I
everyone's
mean,
okay.
just personally, I have to like commend you for those tracks because, as somebody who has to, and it is like one of my, there's not many things about what I do that I like absolutely hate, but
Mm-hmm.
like one of my least favorite things to do, one of the things that I absolutely hate is like having to review a posthumous project that sounds like it was thrown together, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And in these two tracks, I feel like you, as somebody who, you're not the artist who's passed, you're not the artist whose legacy is in question here. As somebody who is dealing with this material, it feels like you've put more intent into these songs in terms of like how it reflects on these individuals on the track, than some posthumous albums sound that get thrown together by whoever and just feel like, sometimes like these industry cash grabs. So it was just very, very refreshing to see those names and sort of like hear that a lot of care went into sort of the meaning behind those songs, and that those artists added to what the point of those songs were in a very sort of like pointed and effective way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Almost as if they were in the studio with you working on that, like you told them the idea,
Yeah, yeah, and that's what K Tronada said when K hit me. He was like, "Yo, how did you get this?" He was like, "It sounds like he literally made it for this beat." And I was
Right, right,
like,
right.
"Yeah, it's crazy." It took me a few hours to kind of figure out how to make it make sense. And mind you, I went from the vocals on the beat to then writing around, and that's how that came together. So for me, and that's why I say I think my strongest point is really production. And it's not necessarily always just making the beat. It's actually producing the record, the project, the whatever it is. Rap is just an instrument that I have and a tool that I have, or singing or vocals and whatever. But the real ability, for me, is how I'm able to take all these pieces and make it make sense a little bit more than some people have the ability to do. Now, there's some people that are really great at that, so I don't want to take away from those people, but I do know what you're saying when you say, like, posthumous albums is, sometimes they do feel like a cash grab, and that doesn't sit well with me. I don't know that I thought we were going to stream 200 million by doing a song with MF Doom. That's not what I'm thinking about. I'm just like, what sounds the best? You know what I mean? And
Right.
how do I make sure this is a lot of pressure to deliver something good in the name of this person? And I think as time progresses, I just get better at doing things like that. I mean, that's the only way to go.
Um, Last thing I wanted to ask you about and sort of get into just a little bit, and I know you've talked about this, was the categorization of this project as a mixtape. Because there's a lot of people saying it's a mixtape, but it sounds like an album. It's like what I expect in terms of like a level of quality from an album. And obviously things in music, things in hip hop are always changing. I sort of felt this way when I first started hearing like some of the early projects Big Crit was coming out with. Like Crit was here, records like that. Like that record is so good, it doesn't feel like a mixtape to me. But even since then, we've progressed so much from what the mixtape is conceptually. It's like it's been a long time since the days of Wayne dedication series and Dat Piff after that, and going further, we have artists like West Side Gun who are sort of like going back and performatively making these grimy projects that are hosted by a DJ, and it's not even like he's making a mixtape because those are the resources he has to deal with. He's doing it as sort of like a tribute to the idea of like maybe what the mixtape was at one time. So with all of that in mind, and taking this project into account with sort of like this overall progression with like what we know the mixtape to be, where do you feel like the mixtape is at conceptually? What even is the mixtape now? Is it still a thing in actuality, or is it kind of does it only exist in name only from what we sort of like historically remember it to be?
Well, yeah, I think it exists in name only because our distribution platforms have advanced.
Yeah, so it's flattened everything in a way.
Yeah. So now it's really about what you want artistically more than anything, because the reason why mixtapes existed is because of lack of certain distribution. It was like the original ones were just parties that people were doing in like the 70s when it was just hip hop, and they were doing their parties in the 80s. And then it became a thing, like obviously more so in the late 90s into the 2000s, where it was like labels can't put out this much material, and they're also not going to pay for the studio time. So you're just going to get some whatever recording you can. You're going to record that shit. And then I'm putting this out, and it sounds like this because of the lack of resources. And also me branding it as this is the raw thing, which is the case. And I think that people in that world accepted the raw versions, especially when you think about underground, because the people who are finding these mixtapes, that's kind of what they want. There's this charm to it. It's like it's not perfect, it's not polished. I'm not even supposed to have this thing. The feeling of that, I think people fell in love with. So I think people call mixtapes based off of a series of things. Mine's obviously comes from, well, not obviously, actually. Mine's comes from honoring the idea of a mixtape, and really tapping back into being in prison, and remembering how you could give a guy, your DOC, Department of Correction sweater, and he'll come back with 2 pairs of shorts. He'll put it together, take it apart and put it together. Or like I used to cut people's hair with a blade and a comb. So I'll shape you up. I'll do all that shit. They give me $2, 2 packs of noodles, and I'll cut your hair and shit, right? The innovation based off of a lack of resources, to me, is the mixtape. The innovative way to put out something like, all right, label's not gonna pay, fuck it. I'm gonna go to the bodegas. I'm gonna give this person this. They're gonna burn it, and they're gonna take it to all the bodegas and sell it. That's fucking like that. To me, is genius, to think of distribution where a label had to control all of this and have the relationships with the record stores, and you figured out a way to get this diss track out in 24 hours. All of New York has it in 24 hours. Then LA gets it in maybe a week or whatever. That to me is the same innovation that comes from prison. So for me, when I take this project, I have the resources around me to create a project at a what people say a high level and quickly. They did not have that and put it out on a DSP. So I'm just honoring what was done, but the honesty is the resources that I do have. Their honesty was the resources they did not have. And that's why my shit might sound more polished. And I put the string sections. I didn't go to like a fucking, I didn't go to East West and hire a big org. I got one guy to come in here and stack that shit. And we just, that was my resources though. You see what I'm saying? I did not have the major label pay $15,000 to get a whole orchestra to do that. But because of the equipment that I have and the ability to put it out on DSPs and distribute it pretty easily, that's what you got. But my thing is, I do think that the innovation of what a mixtape was and why it was created, that belongs in art museums. That belongs in MoCA. And I'm doing some stuff I'm working with, talking with Smithsonian about different things, because that was what I wanted to highlight, and putting DJ Who Kid on it and giving you that feeling, but my version of that feeling, not, because J. Cole did it, right? And that was the original, at least at that time period, that was that original mixtape feeling. It's very intentionally, put together to feel like that, whereas mine was my version. And I think, like I said, that's because Dochi's was a mixtape too, right?
Yeah. The Alligator Bites was supposed to be a mixtape too.
Yeah, and so it's really just semantics. It's the words. It's not. I don't know that there is a mixtape. Wayne said something like, "If you ain't killing somebody else's beat, that ain't a mixtape, bruh." You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's his version of a mixtape. But there were mixtapes way before that weren't that at all.
Yeah, true.
So this is tomatoes, whatever you.
I mean, it sounds a lot of what you're bringing up that makes this for you, and I guess this will be the last thing that I say, is that it sounds like, and I don't know if you always apply this to every project that you do, and I guess maybe this is the question here. It seems like what's attracted you to this, or like what's kind of defining this for you, is like the idea of like a limitation. And these days in your career, in terms of like the connections that you've made, the resources that you've had, or that, that you've gained since I Was Very Bad, like you're in a much different place now than you were then. And I'm sure that you have the ability to do a lot more than you did at one time. But, is there sort of like, have you, as a result of that, have you reached a point where you have to like consciously limit yourself or prevent yourself from overextending yourself, or, kind of put like a block there or a limiter, so that you're not sort of like pushing into something that sounds either inauthentic or too expensive, or, doesn't complement the aesthetics of what you're doing or what the final product is supposed to be? Because, sometimes I hear a lot of producers, and, again, you come from a producer background, say sometimes like, technology and resources that I have access to give me like this option paralysis. It's like I could do so many things and try so many things. How do I limit my options so that I actually get the idea done that I have in my head? Because you could tweak things and enhance things and layer things and hire out things, I'm sure at this point, like forever, if you wanted to. Like, how do you get to the point where like, I'm going to stop myself from doing this in order to actually like get to the final goal and complete the thing I'm trying to complete?
Okay. I mean, that's a great question. I think the answer actually brings us full circle. I've always, ever since before I started putting out music, I've always had to operate off of quote unquote a release date, being in prison and things like that. I've always had to say, all right, this is like when I first went to prison, I had to make my own makeshift calendar where I wrote down all the dates. And I basically would be like, all right, this is the maximum time I probably may have to do. But every day you do good, or 2 days you do good, you get a good day, basically. So I would mark off one side and mark off the other, mark off, and then hopefully one day it'll meet and I'll be home. That was the way that I looked at it. And if I got in trouble or went to the hole or whatever, then I had to take off 5 good days or whatever. I had to do that math. I think that the definition of when I know to when me knowing when to quit is actually based around setting specific deadlines around what I do. And sometimes it's flexible. Don't get it twisted. It can be flexible. However, the discipline of no, this is where I gotta be. Now, if it's the end of the line and this shit is ass, or the people around me that I trust, I play for them. And some people will tell you they don't like it. Some people will show you they don't like it. Most people will. Or they show you it's cool. Meaning, if people aren't like, yo, oh man, can you send that again? Or like, I see people listening on certain apps or whatever, and they're not listening that much. It doesn't mean they don't like it. It could be busy, whatever, but it also lets me, question whether it's time or not. And I go based off of the feeling of people that I really trust. And some of it is the words that they say. So that, with the combination of setting a certain deadline and setting goals, starting from 3 years, and going back from that, I think is how I'm able to know when to kind of just, all right, you could chill now, and then here's another thing. I know that if I keep working on certain, I could fuck this up. I don't like fucking shit up, bro. Like if it's
yeah, you could always make it worse.
Yeah, and that's scary to me. Like knowing that it was good and I just kept doing shit to it. It's like that's actually a fear of mine. I don't have a lot of fears. That's one. And so I think, and then it's just, bro, you're not gonna please everybody too. So when you put it out, you put it out. And back to one of the first things I said, if people don't like it, I can put out more music. I'm prolific enough in what I do to just keep going. I've dropped a project every single year,
right,
for the past however long. I've just figured that out. So, that to me is the beauty of it. And I think that I know that I said this one time. If I've seen it done well, I can do it better. And the reason why, what I mean by that is if I could see it being done and I like what was done, I could just look at this thing and learn it and learn my version of it. And how do you do it better? How do I take it to a different level? I learned how to do that. And that's where the confidence to just say, all right, it's time to be done with this and then go on to the next thing kind of comes from. So yeah, it's kind of just like, I don't know, there's a lot of resources, but one resource that's never changed, one thing that's never changed since, we are Homo sapiens. We're about anywhere from 75,000 to 300,000 years old. The same guy that fucking discovered fire is the same dude, part of the group of people that created the iPhone. And that's the same human being, same mind biologically, but we've evolved socially. The one thing that's never changed is we all still have 24 hours in one day. Time has always remained the same. And I think that understanding the value of that for me has always kind of helped me, know essentially when to quit, you know what I mean? And just keep going. So no matter what resources we have, and the ability to do this, that, and the third, if you put time as the constraint and you figure out how to value the time that you use, again, which is what I learned being locked up, I think that is where you kind of know where you sit with what you create.
IDK, thank you for taking the time and explaining your process and getting to this tape with us. Again, thank you.
I appreciate that.